evening, or perhaps it is the deep hollow of the night where you are. I find, as the years go on, that I lose track of such things entirely. My candle has burned down to a warm, trembling stub. The fire in the hearth behind me has cooled to embers, and somewhere beyond the heavy stone walls of this study, the forest breathes, not the way forests breathe in stories with gentle wind and rustling leaves. No, tonight the forest breathes the way it does when something old and patient is awake inside it, slow, rhythmic, deliberate. Like lungs that have been filling and emptying since long before any of us drew our first breath. I am Corvin Blackmere, head of the Monster Research Guild, 31 years in this field, 212 documented creatures across 14 volumes of this encyclopedia, and I can tell you with the full weight of that experience behind me that there are nights, specific nights, when the air is heavy and the dark is thick, when I sit down at this desk and I feel something that my junior researchers would be embarrassed to hear me admit. I feel afraid. Not of the creatures themselves necessarily. Fear in the field is a tool, and a good researcher learns to use it rather than be ruled by it. What I feel on nights like this is something quieter and stranger than field fear. It is the fear that comes from understanding too well, from having studied something so deeply for so long that you begin to sense the true shape of what you have been looking at, and the true shape is nothing like what you imagined when you began. Tonight we discuss the creature that has taught me that lesson more thoroughly than any other in my career. Tonight we open the file I have kept in a locked drawer for the better part of a decade, not because the information is forbidden, but because every time I open it, I need a moment afterward to sit quietly and remind myself that the walls of this study are solid, and the lock on the door is good, and the forest is out there and I am in here. Tonight we discuss the Blighttrap. You may have heard it called by other names. In the rural settlements of the Ashford lowlands they call it the Green Hollow. In the cave territories of the northern reaches, some still use the old tongue name Vorath, which translates roughly as the patient mouth. But in guild records, and in the 12 years of documented study that followed its initial discovery, it has carried one other name above all others, the name that its first discoverer gave it, the name that has since spread to every naturalist, scholar, and terrified survivor who has come to know it. They call it the mycelial reaper. And that name, I think you will agree by the time we are finished tonight, is entirely, magnificently earned. The Blighttrap is a creature unlike anything else in our documented bestiary. It does not fit neatly into the categories we use to organize the natural world. It is not simply a plant, though it grows from the earth and feeds through absorption. It is not simply a fungus, though the mycelium network threading through its body and spreading through the soil beneath its feet is one of the most sophisticated biological systems I have ever had the privilege and occasional terror of studying. It is not simply an animal, though it hunts and plans and waits and strikes with a violence and precision that would humble any predator we have catalogued. It is all three of these things at once: a walking, breathing, thinking forest in the shape of a hunter, a trap that grew legs, a patience given teeth. In the course of this entry, we will explore every dimension of this remarkable and deeply dangerous creature. We will walk through its habitats, the damp forests and dark caves and crumbling ruins it calls home. We will examine its body in careful detail, from the layered jaws of its massive head to the root structures that anchor it to the earth below. We will document its abilities, 5 of them, each more unsettling than the last. We will study its behavior, its diet, its hunting strategies, and the intelligence that knits them all together into something that has cost the guild more than any other creature we have ever pursued. And we will tell, for the first time in this format, the full story of the first recorded encounter with a Blighttrap, a story that has lived in guild archives for over 20 years, and that deserves to be told in full, out of respect for the people who lived it, and the ones who did not come home. But first, before we go any further, I want you to understand something about the nature of this creature, something that took me years to fully grasp, and that I believe is the most important frame through which to understand everything that follows. The Blighttrap is not aggressive because it is angry. It is not dangerous because it is feral or unpredictable or out of control. It is all of these things, aggressive, dangerous, and relentless, because it is perfectly designed. Every characteristic it possesses, from the glow of its jaw to the spread of its underground network to the sickening speed of its strike, exists as part of an elegant and ancient biological system that has been refined over centuries into something terrifyingly close to perfect. The Blighttrap does not hate you. It does not fear you. It simply identifies you as nutrient and proceeds accordingly. There is something strangely clarifying about that, and something I confess that I find beautiful in the same way one finds a thunderstorm beautiful or a deep canyon beautiful. Not comforting, not safe, but beautiful. Pull your chair closer, the candle is warm enough, and the forest for now is still. Let us begin the habitat and territory of the Blighttrap. Here is a particular quality of air in a Blighttrap's territory. I noticed it for the first time on my third field expedition, the one that took me into the Grimhollow cave system for 11 days, and I have recognized it in every subsequent documented site since then. It is a thickness, a heaviness. The air smells of wet earth and moss and something just beneath the threshold of rot, not quite decay, but the suggestion of it, the way a wound smells before it turns. You breathe it in and your body understands on a level far older than reason that you are somewhere that things die, and that the dying is organized. The Blighttrap requires moisture the way a fire requires oxygen. This is not a preference, it is a biological absolute. The creature's fungal physiology, and particularly the vast underground mycelium network that serves as its extended nervous system, cannot function without a consistently humid environment. Dry air is lethal to the mycelium. Without it, the network fractures, the creature loses its capacity to sense vibrations at range, and the extraordinary regenerative ability that makes the Blighttrap so difficult to kill begins to fail. A dry Blighttrap is a dying Blighttrap, which is, I will note, the only kind worth encountering. In practice, this means the creature inhabits three primary types of environment, all sharing that quality of deep, persistent dampness. The first is what we call the old forest, not merely any woodland, but the ancient kind where canopy growth is so dense that sunlight has not touched the floor in centuries. The kind of forest where the air itself seems to have weight, where every root is carpeted 3 inches thick in moss, where standing water gathers in every depression and hollow, and where the smell of the air is the smell of 1,000 things slowly, continuously returning to earth. These forests are not pleasant to walk through, and I suspect they were not pleasant long before the Blighttrap came to live in them. But the creature thrives in them with absolute comfort, and it has an uncanny instinct for the specific pockets within these forests where moisture is most concentrated, the low ground near seasonal streams, the shaded hollows where fog settles and never quite burns off, the dense clusters of old-growth trees where several root systems are deep in the process of mutual decay. One pattern I have observed and documented across multiple sites is the Blighttrap's tendency to establish itself near or around fallen trees. Not standing dead trees, fallen ones. Trees that have come down and begun the long, years-long process of decomposing back into the soil. These fallen giants provide the creature with both an initial food source, the decomposing wood feeds the early mycelium growth, and extraordinary natural camouflage. A Blighttrap in resting mode, positioned against or growing through a large fallen log, is essentially invisible to an untrained eye. The moss and vinework of its body blends with the log's own surface. The mushroom caps along its shoulders red as the natural fungal growths that appear on any decomposing wood. And the glow, that faint, beautiful, deadly glow from within its jaw, is easily mistaken, in a dim forest, for the bioluminescent fungi that grow on rotting wood throughout these environments. The second habitat is the cave system, and if the old forest is uncomfortable, the cave is something else entirely. I have spent more time underground in pursuit of Blighttrap documentation than any researcher in guild history, and I will tell you this plainly: the creature is more dangerous in a cave than anywhere else. The darkness removes nearly all of the visual cues that might, in a forest, give a careful observer some small warning. The acoustic environment of a cave distorts sound in ways that make it nearly impossible to locate the source of movement. The tight confines of underground passages eliminate most escape routes, and the creature's bioluminescent lure, which we will discuss in detail when we reach the abilities chapter, operates in cave darkness with a potency it simply cannot achieve in a forest where competing light sources exist. In caves, the Blighttrap becomes something almost mythological. The glow of its jaw, pulsing softly in the absolute dark of a deep cavern, has been described by survivors as the most beautiful thing they have ever seen in their lives. Warm, welcoming, like a fire in a window on a winter night. The human nervous system, confronted with total darkness and the stress of being underground, responds to any light source with a relief so profound it overrides caution. The creature knows this. It has always known this. Every day it has spent in the dark of a cave has been a day refining its understanding of that single biological truth. Over 11 days of observation from a concealed position above the cave floor, I watched the Blighttrap specimen in Chamber 7 remain completely motionless for 6 full days before a group of miners disturbed its territory. In those 6 days it was visited by 2 deer, a large cat, and on the 3rd day a lost shepherd boy who walked within 8 feet of it, apparently mistaking its glow for a lantern someone had left behind. The creature did not strike at any of them. It waited. I believe it was waiting for a larger target. I believe it knew one was coming. The third habitat, abandoned ruins, is, to my mind, the most philosophically interesting and the most practically dangerous for the people who encounter it, because ruins attract people, explorers and treasure hunters and historians and the curious and the young and the adventurous. people who carry maps and torches and the full confidence of someone who believes they are walking into a place that is empty. The Blighttrap is drawn to ruins for practical biological reasons. Old stone provides structural shelter, accumulated organic debris offers initial nutrition, and the stable moisture levels within enclosed stone architecture suit its physiology. But there is something that functions at a behavioral level, almost like an understanding of what ruins are for. These places will attract prey. Regularly, predictably, without any effort on the creature's part, travelers will walk through the door, and so the Blighttrap anchors itself and waits, and the ruins do the hunting for it. In guild terminology, we call these sites baited ruins, not because anyone deliberately put bait there, but because the presence of a Blighttrap within a structure effectively makes the structure itself into a lure. The stories of treasure and history draw people in, the glow in the dark draws them deeper, and the network beneath the floor has been listening to their footsteps since the moment they crossed the threshold. Now, and this is crucial, the Blighttrap does not simply occupy a territory the way most creatures do. It is the territory. Through its underground mycelium network, which we will discuss in depth when we reach the abilities section, the creature's presence extends far beyond its physical body. Individual specimens have been documented with mycelium spreads of over 300 yards in every direction from their central root structure. That means every footfall, every vibration, every movement within a radius greater than the length of 3 standard city blocks is being felt, processed, and catalogued by the creature before you ever lay eyes on it. When you enter a Blighttrap's territory, the Blighttrap already knows you are there. It knew before you reached its edge. It has been watching you through the earth, through its root fingers, through the ancient and patient network it has woven through the soil like dark lace, since the moment your first step disturbed the ground above its filaments. Think about that the next time you walk into an old forest at dusk. Think about it when the air smells heavy and damp and something just slightly wrong. Think about it when you see a warm glow through the trees ahead. Think about it, and then think very carefully about whether you want to keep walking forward. Now let us talk about the anatomy and physical description of the Blighttrap. Have drawn the Blighttrap more times than any other creature in my career. I have sketched it from memory in firelit field tents, reconstructed it from survivor accounts, and on 3 occasions I do not reflect on casually, observed a living specimen from close enough range that I could see the individual mycelium veins pulsing beneath its surface. And what strikes me every time I put pen to paper is that the creature is not ugly. This surprises people when I say it. They expect me, given everything I have documented about what the Blighttrap does and how it does it, to describe it as grotesque, horrifying, the stuff of nightmares. And it is all of those things, but underneath the horror there is something else. There is a symmetry, a coherence. Every element of the creature's body exists in exact service to what the creature needs to do, and that elegance, the elegance of something so completely, ruthlessly fit for its purpose, creates a kind of terrible beauty that I have never been able to entirely look away from. Let us begin, as nature does, from the top. The Blighttrap's head is a massive Venus flytrap maw, and I want you to hold that image clearly in your mind before I tell you how it differs from the common flytrap you may have seen in a naturalist's collection. The common flytrap has soft lobes, fringed with cilia, long hair-like trigger filaments. It is honestly a rather gentle-looking mechanism when you see it at rest. The Blighttrap's head shares the architecture, 2 lobes, hinged at the base, that close with extraordinary speed when triggered. But the similarities end there. The lobes of the Blighttrap's primary jaw are not 2. They are many layered, interlocking sections of jaw, each capable of independent movement, arranged so that a prey animal caught in the outermost layer is immediately driven deeper into a second layer, then a third. There is no escape from the innermost jaw once it closes. There is barely any escape from the first. And lining every surface of every layer instead of soft cilia are rows of needle-like teeth, curved inward at their tips in the manner of a fish hook. They are not for crushing, they are for holding. The enzymatic secretions that digest prey, we will reach those, do the rest. Inside this layered maw, the creature glows. The bioluminescence is concentrated on the inner surfaces and the fleshy interior tissue, and it shifts in color depending on the creature's state and, we believe, its hunger. A well-fed, resting Blighttrap glows a cool, dim green, the color of old phosphorescent moss. A hungry, alert, or agitated specimen shifts toward a deeper, richer color, a sickly, bruised purple that has no business being as beautiful as it is. When the creature is in full attack mode, this glow blazes. It is bright enough in darkness to illuminate a radius of 10 feet around the open jaw. Survivors have described the experience of seeing the jaw fully open and lit as one of the most viscerally alarming things they have ever witnessed, not just frightening, but wrong in some deep and instinctive way, the way a very large thing moving very fast is wrong. Below the head, the body. And here we transition from the elegance of the jaw to something altogether different in character, something that looks, at first glance, less like a living creature than like a section of forest floor that decided to stand upright and walk. The Blighttrap's body is a hunched semi-humanoid mass, and I use the word humanoid carefully because the resemblance to a bipedal form is real but imprecise. It is the shape of a large, stooped figure, but the substance is nothing like flesh. The core of the body is a dense tangle of thick vines, compressed moss, dried mud and root material, and accumulated fungal growth, all of it held together by the living mycelium network that runs through the interior like a secondary skeleton. The surface of the body shifts between regions of dense, healthy growth and sections that appear, and in a structural sense may genuinely be actively decaying, dark patches, collapsing tissue, material that looks as though it should be on the forest floor rather than upright and breathing. And yet the creature is never truly damaged by this apparent decay, because it is in constant regeneration. The rot you see on its surface is simply raw material in the process of being recycled, broken down and rebuilt by the mycelium network into new tissue, new growth, new functionality. The creature is, in a very real sense, always simultaneously dying and being reborn. Along the shoulders and upper back, the fungal growths are the most visually arresting feature after the head. They emerge in clusters, mushroom caps of varying sizes, from small button-sized growths to large, plate-wide structures in deep browns and sickly yellows. Interspersed among these are the puffball sac organs, swollen, smooth-surfaced chambers that look at rest, like oversized puffball mushrooms. They are soft to the touch, or would be. I advise against touching them, and they are pressure sensitive. Impact, heat, or close contact will rupture them instantly, releasing concentrated clouds of spores that we will discuss in detail next segment. Between all of these growths running through the surface of the body like rivers on a map, the glowing mycelium veins pulse with a rhythmic golden-green light. In darkness, this pulsing makes the entire body glow faintly, like a lantern seen through thick cloth. The arms deserve particular attention because they are perhaps the most frequently underestimated part of the creature's anatomy. They appear from a distance to be thick vine limbs, and structurally that is largely what they are. But their reach is extraordinary, extending to a length that observers consistently misjudge. A Blighttrap that appears to be 10 feet away may have arm reach sufficient to close that gap in one extension, and what those arms end in makes the reach doubly dangerous. Some terminate in clusters of clawed, thorn tendrils designed to grip and entangle. Others terminate in smaller, independent Flytrap mouths, each one a fully functional capture organ capable of snapping shut on its own reflex, independent of the creature's main consciousness. These smaller mouths cannot consume prey. They are not large enough for that, but they do not need to. Their purpose is to seize, to pierce, and to hold until the primary jaw can complete the work. And finally, the legs and roots. Below what might be called the creature's waist, the vine and moss structure transitions into something altogether more plant-like, thick root structures that spread outward and downward from the creature's base, digging into the soil with a grip that can anchor several thousand pounds of creature against a force attempting to drag it. In resting mode, these roots are buried, and the creature appears to have no legs at all, just a mass of vine and fungus rising from the ground like a monstrous growth. But when the creature activates, the roots rip free with explosive violence, and the mass of the creature lunges forward on them with a speed that has to be seen to be truly believed. The roots also serve as the primary connection point between the creature's physical body and the underground mycelium network. Through them, the creature feels the earth. Through them, it hears every footstep within 300 yards. Through them, in a colony situation, it speaks to its kin. The whole creature, fully upright, stands between 9 and 12 feet tall. Its arm span, fully extended, can exceed 20 feet. Its primary jaw, open to full gape, is large enough to swallow a grown person. I have measured this. I prefer not to discuss how. Next, we shall dive into the documented abilities of the Blighttrap. In 31 years of field research, I have documented creatures with single abilities so dangerous that an entire guild protocol had to be written to address them alone. I have catalogued fire breathing, acid secretion, sonic disorientation, petrification, and at least 2 separate mechanisms of psychological compulsion. The Blighttrap does not have one ability of note, it has 5, and they work in concert, each one setting up the next, each one closing off an escape route that the previous one opened, until the full picture emerges as something less like a list of individual traits and more like a carefully designed system of interlocking inevitabilities. Understanding these abilities is not merely academic. Understanding them may someday be the thing that saves your life. Let us begin with the one that kills most people before the creature ever moves. The lure glow bioluminescent mimicry. In a sense, this is the simplest of the 5 abilities. The creature produces light from the inner surfaces of its maw, and that light is controllable, modulable, and deployed with what I can only describe as deliberate intention. But the simplicity of the mechanism is entirely deceptive, because what the creature does with that light reaches into something so fundamental in the human nervous system that rational awareness is almost no defense against it. Picture this: you are walking at dusk through an old forest, the path is unfamiliar, the light has been failing for an hour and your torch is burning low. You are tired and a little frightened in the way that all people are a little frightened in old forests at dusk, even when they refuse to admit it. And then, through the trees ahead, perhaps 200 yards, perhaps a little more, you see a light, soft, warm, flickering gently in a pattern you recognize at some cellular level as the pattern of fireflies, or of a lantern, or of a window with a fire burning inside it. The light of safety, the light of someone else being there. Your body responds before your mind can form a question. Your pace quickens, your heart rate drops, the fear recedes. And you walk toward the light, because that is what every one of your ancestors has done in that moment since before the first village was built, since before language existed to name what the light meant. The light means safety. The light means you are not alone. The light means you can stop being afraid. The light is the jaw of the Blighttrap, and by the time you understand that, you're close enough for the roots to pull free. Survivors, the small and fortunate number of them, describe the moment of recognition as a specific and terrible variety of horror. Not the sharp, clean horror of sudden danger, but the slow and nauseating horror of realizing that the thing that was comforting you was never what you thought it was. That the warmth and the welcome and the sense of safety were the creature speaking to you in the language of your own hope, using your own nervous system against you, and that you walked toward it willingly. The Blighttrap has been doing this since before any human being was alive to be deceived by it. It did not learn this trick from watching us. We, in a way, were designed for this trick long before we arrived. The creature simply found the key that evolution had left in the lock. Now suppose you are one of the rare ones. Suppose something, a sound, a smell, a flash of wrongness in the quality of the light makes you hesitate and take a step back rather than a step forward. Suppose you recognize in time what you are looking at. What happens then? This is when the spore cloud becomes relevant. The puffball sac organs distributed across the creature's body are pressure sensitive and rupture under impact, heat, or the mechanical stress of rapid movement. When the creature activates, when it tears free of the earth and lunges, several of these sacs burst simultaneously. The cloud they release is not smoke and not gas in the conventional sense. It is a dense suspension of microscopic spores, each one carrying a complex chemical payload that, when inhaled or absorbed through the skin and eyes, begins interacting with the nervous system within seconds. The effect is immediate and overwhelming. The hallucinations are not random. That is the critical detail that my researchers established after years of analyzing survivor accounts. The spores do not simply distort vision, they generate vision. And what they generate appears to be drawn specifically from the victim's own memories and emotional associations. The mind reaches for familiarity, for safety, and the spores amplify and weaponize that reaching. Survivors have reported seeing their childhood homes in the middle of the forest. Beloved faces emerging from the undergrowth, familiar roads appearing where there are none. One researcher in my guild during a documented exposure event described spending what felt like an hour walking through the city of his birth, a city he had not visited in 20 years before the chemical effect wore off, and he found himself 3 miles from camp, standing in a marsh with no recollection of how he had gotten there. I saw my mother standing at the edge of the clearing holding a lantern. She was calling my name. I was so certain it was her. I took 4 steps toward her before I realized she was standing inside the creature's open jaw and smiling as though that was perfectly natural. Survivor account, junior researcher Aldrich Venn, year 437, the Ashwood Survey. The biological purpose is devastatingly elegant. A prey animal that cannot trust its own eyes cannot run in a straight line. A prey animal that cannot run in a straight line cannot escape. The spores do not need to incapacitate the victim. They only need to disorient them enough that flight becomes erratic, enough that the creature's unhurried pursuit can close the distance while the prey stumbles through visions of home. If the spores fail to provide enough confusion, or if you are fortunate enough to have masked your face in time, the next line of the creature's offense is the snap trap limbs. I have already described the physical structure of these arms in the anatomy section. What I want to convey here is the speed. The speed of the snap trap is a reflex, not a decision. The smaller flytrap mouths at the ends of those vine arms do not wait for the creature's consciousness to issue an instruction. They respond to contact and close proximity movement with the same autonomous hair-trigger reflex that makes the common flytrap close, but scaled up by orders of magnitude, and without the common flytrap's tendency to occasionally misfire on raindrops and wind. Researchers who have studied the snap mechanism under controlled post-mortem conditions have clocked the closure time at under 50 milliseconds. For reference, A human blink takes between 100 and 400 milliseconds. The snap trap is, in measurable terms, faster than you can blink, faster than your nervous system can register the movement and begin to process a response. And the grip strength, we tested this using extracted limb specimens in a Guild laboratory, was sufficient to shear medium-weight chain armor as if it were cloth. Once you're caught, the mycelium network completes the picture in a different way, not by hurting you directly, but by ensuring that help does not come. In a colony environment, the vibrations of a struggle on the surface are transmitted instantly through the underground network to every other Blighttrap specimen in the territory. They do not need to hear you. They do not need to see your torchlight. They feel you through the earth, and they know what the pattern of those vibrations means: prey caught, prey fighting, prey present. Any attempt to return to the site to stage a rescue will be felt long before the rescue party arrives. And finally, the ability that makes the Blighttrap nearly impossible to defeat even when you have managed all of the above. The ability that has broken more guild operations against this creature than any other factor: the regeneration. Blighttrap tissue regrows. This is not a slow process of healing over days and weeks, the way a flesh wound heals. This is rapid, nutrient-fueled reconstruction. Severed limbs begin the process of regrowth within hours of a substantial feeding. Damaged jaw sections repair within minutes of sustained enzymatic exposure to captured prey. The mycelium veins, which carry the nutritional material used for regeneration, pulse visibly faster during an active repair. The creature's entire body brightens slightly as the process accelerates. Researchers have described striking a Blighttrap 17 times with edged weapons during a desperate defense, watching each wound seal before the next blow could be delivered, and eventually understanding that they were not fighting a creature so much as testing the limits of an entity that intended to survive them no matter what they did. The optimal window to defeat a Blighttrap, if such a thing can be said to exist, is during a period of starvation, when the regeneration is starved of fuel. The difficulty is that by the time most people encounter one, that window has almost certainly already closed. 5 abilities, each one extraordinary on its own. Together a complete and merciless system designed, refined, and patient. Always patient. All this talking is making me hungry. Speaking of food, that brings us to the next topic: the behavior, diet, and the nature of Blighttrap aggression. Here is a persistent and deeply dangerous myth about the Blighttrap that circulates in popular naturalist writing, in travelers' stories, and in the kind of confident second-hand knowledge that spreads in village taverns among people who have heard about the creature without ever seeing it. The myth goes like this: the Blighttrap is patient and therefore it is passive. It waits and therefore it prefers to be left alone. If you move carefully and respectfully through its territory, if you do not threaten it or disturb its roots, the Blighttrap will allow you to pass unmolested. I have heard this theory repeated with genuine conviction by scholars who have spent their careers studying natural texts. I have never, not once, heard it from a person who has encountered a living Blighttrap. Let me be precise about something. The Blighttrap is patient because it is confident. It waits because it has calculated correctly that waiting gives it an advantage. Its patience is not temperament, it is strategy, and strategy is not the same as restraint. The creature's behavioral state at any given moment exists on a spectrum between what Guild researchers call anchor mode and strike mode, with a third state, pursuit mode, available when circumstances require it. Understanding this spectrum is not merely interesting. It is the nearest thing to a survival framework that this creature permits us. In anchor mode, the Blighttrap is at rest in the fullest biological sense. The root structures are buried deep and spread wide, maximizing the underground sensory coverage. The vine arms hang loosely, draped across the ground and nearby vegetation like fallen branches. The jaw dims to its lowest possible glow, sometimes nothing more than the faintest green shimmer, like phosphorescent moss, barely distinguishable from the natural bioluminescence found throughout damp forest environments. The body settles into the surrounding vegetation with a stillness that is genuinely remarkable. I have walked within 15 feet of an anchored Blighttrap without identifying it as anything other than an unusual cluster of vegetation. I discovered my error when the mycelium network transmitted my footsteps to it, and I saw the veins in the nearest vine brighten, just slightly, with renewed attention. Anchor mode can persist for extraordinary periods. The longest documented continuous anchor phase lasted an estimated 6 weeks at a site in the Grimhollow cave system before a group of miners triggered an attack. During those 6 weeks, the creature was not sleeping, it was listening. Processing, cataloging every vibration in its territory and determining, with something that functions like patience and may, in a biological sense, actually be intelligence, that nothing it had detected so far was worth the expenditure of energy that movement requires. It was waiting for something large enough to justify waking up. When the right target enters range, the right combination of weight distribution, gait pattern, and number of individuals that the mycelium network identifies as optimal prey, the transition to strike mode begins. And it is here that everything about the Blighttrap's behavioral profile inverts so completely and so rapidly that people who have spent their careers in fieldwork describe it as among the most disorienting experiences of their professional lives. The creature that appeared to be a patch of forest becomes a predator in under 2 seconds. The roots tear free of the earth with a sound survivors describe consistently as a crack of splitting bone. The vine arms lash outward to their full terrible extension. The jaw blazes open, that deep, bruised purple lighting the immediate environment with a cold, nauseating radiance. And the creature that was 10 feet away and motionless is suddenly 3 feet away and moving at a speed that your mind cannot immediately reconcile with what it was doing a moment before. We have timed this in controlled documentation conditions. The transition from complete stillness to full strike velocity covers up to 12 feet of ground in under 2 seconds. In practical terms, if you are inside the 12-foot radius when the creature decides to move, your options for survival narrow to near zero before your nervous system has finished processing the fact that something has changed. The Blighttrap makes no warning display. It does not vocalize before attacking. It does not bluff, retreat, or negotiate. Once a target has been identified by the mycelium network as obtainable prey, the creature will pursue that target with single-minded biological purpose until the target is captured and consumed. The creature sustains damage sufficient to interrupt the pursuit, which, given its regenerative capacity, requires extraordinary force, or the target exits the creature's territory entirely, which requires covering several hundred yards of hostile terrain while disoriented by spores and potentially being flanked by colony members. When prey escapes the immediate strike and attempts flight, the Blighttrap enters pursuit mode. This is the state that most closely resembles what we would conventionally call hunting, and it is deeply unnerving to observe. The creature moves with a controlled, relentless efficiency, not sprinting, not frantic, but covering ground with the unhurried certainty of something that has no concept of giving up. The spore clouds deploy at intervals to cloud the prey's navigation. The lure glow shifts to a warmer, directional pattern to draw stragglers toward the creature rather than away from it. And in a colony environment, the mycelium network alerts every other connected specimen to the pursuit, effectively coordinating a herding operation across hundreds of yards of terrain, using the underground network as a communication system faster than any runner could carry a message. In terms of diet, the Blighttrap's biological classification is apex omnivore with predatory specialization. It will consume anything organic, insects, small rodents, fish from streams that pass through its territory, deer, bears, large cats, and humans, but its preference in the clinical calculus of its nutritional needs is always the largest available prey. This is not aggression in the emotional sense, it is mathematics. Large prey yields more nutrient material, and more nutrient material drives faster regeneration, which drives higher resilience, which extends the creature's survival. The Blighttrap does not eat large prey because it is violent, it eats large prey because it is efficient. The feeding process itself is among the more distressing things I have had to document. The inner surfaces of the jaw secrete a powerful enzymatic fluid that begins the process of breaking down organic material within seconds of contact. Harder materials, bone, dense vegetation, metal, are processed more slowly but are never expelled while any nutritional value remains. The creature is extraordinarily thorough. What cannot be digested is absorbed into the body mass or expelled over time. Guild researchers examining Blighttrap specimens have found embedded within the vine and moss body structure blades, buckles, rings, partial pieces of armor, and on 2 separate occasions, writing implements that were subsequently identified as belonging to documented missing researchers. I keep a blade in a display case on the wall of my study. It was recovered from the body mass of a Blighttrap killed during a guild operation in year 434. The initials engraved on the handle belong to a researcher named Petra Hale, who disappeared during a solo survey in the Ashford Lowlands in year 431, 3 years inside that creature. I had known her since she was a student. I look at that blade on the difficult nights, when I am writing entries like this one, and I think about what it means to know where someone ended up, and what it means that knowing does not make it easier to understand. One final behavioral characteristic deserves specific attention, because it speaks to a level of cognition that the Guild debated for years before consensus formed around the word I now use to describe it. That word is planning. On multiple documented occasions, Blighttraps have been observed allowing prey to escape immediate capture when a colony member was positioned to intercept the fleeing target. The creature could have struck. It had range. It had speed, it chose not to, in apparent awareness that the prey would run into a second specimen. In 3 recorded cases, this calculation was correct. The prey survived the first Blighttrap and was caught by the second. Some of my colleagues continue to attribute this to instinct, to behavioral patterning rather than conscious thought. I respect their position, I simply no longer share it. I have watched a Blighttrap not lunge when it could have. I have watched it wait, with a stillness that felt, to me in that moment, like decision. You may call that instinct if you prefer. But I think something in that forest was thinking about what I was going to do next. The Blackwood expedition was the first recorded encounter with the Blighttrap, year 412. Ashford Hollows, almost everyone died during this expedition. The Blackwoods contained too many horrors. Thankfully, through the next 14 expeditions, we were able to recover many of the journal and artifact used in the previous expeditions. Yet sadly, only 1/7 of the Blackwoods are mapped to this day. Very creature in this encyclopedia has a moment of first contact, a specific documented point in history when the world of natural knowledge became aware that something new, something real and dangerous and catalogable, existed in the dark places it had not yet mapped. Sometimes that moment is a distant sighting from a safe hillside, a curious set of tracks preserved in mud, or a strange corpse brought to a village healer who sent for a guild researcher. The Blighttrap's moment of first contact was none of these things. It was not a sighting, it was not a track, it was an event. And the event left 6 people dead, 2 people permanently changed, and 1 woman so determined to understand what had happened to her colleagues that she spent the next 12 years going back. The year was 412 by the guild calendar. The location was a marshy lowland forest known, in the regional maps of the time, as the Ashford Hollows, a dense, moisture-heavy woodland in what was then the frontier territory of the eastern guild districts. The expedition was a routine botanical survey, commissioned to catalogue unusual fungal specimens reported by local woodcutters, 8 members in total. 6 researchers, 1 field guide and 1 contracted naturalist, a woman named Maeve Holloway, who had been working with the guild as a contractor for 3 years, and who was, by all accounts, the most methodically careful observer on the team. They entered the hollows on a clear autumn morning. The field guide's notes, recovered later, pressed between the pages of his pack journal, described the air as thick and warm despite the season, smelling strongly of turned earth. He noted the unusual silence. No birdsong past the first quarter mile, no rustling in the undergrowth that would indicate small mammals. He attributed it to the density of the canopy. He was not wrong about the cause, he was wrong about what it meant. On the first day nothing happened. They mapped, they sampled, they made camp at a dryish rise of ground and ate their field rations and talked about the unusual quality of the fungal specimens they had been finding. The team's lead botanist, a man named Gregor Fenn, was excited. The specimens were unlike anything in the existing guild catalogue, large, luminescent, with a vein structure that pulsed visibly even in the daylight hours. He collected samples, he sketched them. He made notes in a careful small hand that have since been reproduced in multiple guild training documents as a textbook example of rigorous observation. The irony is not lost on me that the notes were found in the hollows, beside a fallen log, 2 weeks later. Fenn was not with them. On the second day, they found the fallen oak. It was a tree of genuinely impressive age and size. Holloway estimated it at over 200 years old from the girth, and it had come down sometime in the previous several seasons, long enough ago that its bark had begun to soften and the first major fungal colonization was well underway. The specimens growing from it were remarkable, large pale caps with that same luminescent veining the team had been documenting elsewhere. Fenn was immediately drawn to the largest cluster, which had established itself near what appeared to be a natural hollow in the center of the log. He approached it. He began to examine it. He reached toward the largest cap, the way any botanist reaching for a new specimen reaches, with curiosity, with care, with the particular quality of absorbed attention that researchers develop over years of work, and which, in that moment, made him completely blind to everything outside the immediate circumference of what he was looking at. It was Holloway who noticed, as the light shifted toward late afternoon, that the fallen log was not lying in quite the same position it had occupied that morning. She noticed it the way she noticed most things, obliquely, through the corner of careful attention, the kind of noticing that does not immediately become thought but registers somewhere below conscious processing. She almost dismissed it. Logs do not move. She had measured the position of the log herself that morning for mapping purposes, but the shape was different, the angle was wrong. And now that she was looking at it directly, the hollow in the center where Fenn was crouching, the hollow she had catalogued as a natural feature of the decay process, was not the same shape it had been 2 hours ago. It was deeper and it was breathing. She said later in her dictated account that she opened her mouth to call out to Fenn and found that she could not make a sound. Not from fear, she was specific about this, and I believe her, but from a kind of paralysis that came from the disconnect between what she was seeing and what the rational part of her mind was prepared to accept as real. The log was moving. The log was alive. The moss on its surface was not moss. The fungal growths were not growing from the wood. They were growing from something that was using the wood as a resting surface and a disguise and a larder and a home, all at once. Fenn's hand touched the largest mushroom cap. The jaw opened. Holloway's account of the minutes that followed is fragmented in the way that accounts of traumatic events always are nonlinear, sensory-focused, full of gaps where the mind refused to record and absences where it chose later not to reconstruct. She describes the creature rising, the roots tearing free, a sound she compares repeatedly to the cracking of ice on a winter lake, sudden, sharp, and somehow deeply wrong in the context of a summer forest. She describes the glow from the jaw blazing open, not the gentle green she had been cataloguing all day, but something colder and brighter and purple, and she says, and this detail appears in her account no fewer than 4 times, which tells me it was among the most indelible things she experienced. She says that the light was beautiful. Even then, even in that moment, it was beautiful. The spores came with the movement. She does not describe hallucinations directly in the account, but she describes a period of time she cannot account for, perhaps a minute, perhaps 5, during which she does not know where she was or what she was doing. When her awareness returned, 3 of her colleagues were gone. Not fleeing, gone. Fenn had not fled, he never had the chance. What follows in the account is a testimony to the quality of Maeve Holloway's specific character that I find, even now, difficult to read without feeling something profound. In a moment of total chaos, with spore clouds still drifting through the evening air and the sounds of the creature moving through the undergrowth still audible, she did not run without direction. She pressed her face into her coat to filter the spores. She recorded what she had seen in a mental inventory, the shape, the jaw, the root structure, the glow. She counted the sounds of movement and tried to track the creature's location by them. And she ran perpendicular to the sound rather than away from the light, which was the only decision that separated her from the majority of her colleagues. The field guide survived by a different accident. He fell into a concealed sinkhole during the initial chaos and lay still at the bottom of it, 2 feet below the range at which the mycelium network's vibration sensors could precisely locate him, for 3 hours until the forest went quiet. He emerged at midnight. He said later that he was not brave, he was simply too frightened to move. 6 people died in the Ashford Hollows that evening. Their names are recorded in the Guild archive and I read them every year on the anniversary. Gregor Fenn, Taylin Ward, Bess Orvath, Cador Penn, Ilse Morn, Darrow Vex, who survived the initial attack and ran for 3 miles without stopping, emerged from the tree line at the road and collapsed in a harvested field where a farmer found him at dawn. He was alive. His hair had gone entirely white during those 3 miles. He never returned to field work. I did not feel brave in the hollows. I felt like a woman walking away from something she did not yet have words for, carrying a debt to people she could not save, and understanding that the only way to pay that debt was to go back and learn everything. Maeve Holloway, dictated account, year 412, recovered from Guild Archive, File 1B. Holloway went back, not to the hollows immediately. She spent 2 months recovering physically and otherwise, but to the work. She wrote the first account. She submitted it to the Guild, and then, over the course of the next 12 years, she returned to the Ashford Hollows 16 times, always with large teams, always at the edges. Always maintaining distance, mapping the territory, documenting the patterns. Watching the glow from the tree line at a distance that was safe and that she knew was safe, because she had measured it herself and understood now what she was looking at. She named the creature. The name she chose, Blighttrap, from the blighting spread of the mycelium, and the trap mechanism of the jaw was submitted to the Guild Nomenclature Committee in year 414, 2 years after the expedition, and accepted unanimously. It always does go unanimously when the person who names a thing has earned the right to name it in the only way that truly earns anything, with loss, with time, with the decision to go back rather than to stay away. Holloway's original field notes hang framed in the main entryway of the Guild Hall, 43 pages written partly in her own hand and partly transcribed from dictation when her hands were too unsteady to write clearly. I have walked past them every working day of my career. I always pause at page 12, the first page on which she attempts a sketch of the creature. The drawing is shaky, imprecise, made from a traumatized memory and not from direct observation. But the jaw is right, the glow is right. And at the bottom of the page, in handwriting that is clearly calmer than the rest, written, I believe, not in the immediate aftermath of the expedition, but some weeks later, when she had had time to think, she has written a single sentence. It reads, "It did not chase me. I have been trying ever since to understand whether that means I was fortunate, or whether it simply decided I was not worth the effort. I am not certain which answer disturbs me more." I have thought about that sentence for 20 years. I think about it now, sitting here at this desk with the forest breathing outside and the candle burning low, writing the final pages of the entry on the creature that began with her 6 colleagues, and that has cost this guild more than any entry I have ever written. The Blighttrap is still out there, in the Ashfan hollows and the Grimhollow caves and the baited ruins and the damp old forests and the dark places at the edge of the roads you walk at night when your torch is burning low. It is anchored. It is listening. It is feeling the earth for the particular pattern of vibrations that means something warm and large and alive is moving through its territory. It is dimming its glow to the faintest possible shimmer. It is patient, the way only something very old and very confident can afford to be patient. And somewhere in the deep underground network of filaments threading through the soil beneath it, the memory of every living thing that has ever walked within 300 yards of it, every heartbeat, every footfall, every small disturbance of the earth, is still being held and processed, and understood in whatever way the Blighttrap understands things. Do not walk toward the light in the forest, do not touch the interesting mushroom, do not enter the dark ruin alone. Do not confuse stillness with safety or patience with peace. These are the things that Maeve Holloway's 6 colleagues did not know, and that I am spending my life making sure that other people do. I am Corvin Blackmere. This has been Volume 14 of the Monster Research Guild Encyclopedia, The Blighttrap, The Mycelial Reaper, The Patient Mouth in the Dark. Stay close to the fire tonight. And if you hear something tap at the window, leave it alone. This concludes the Monster Research Guild Classified Field Encyclopedia. Volume 14, presented by Guild Head Corvin Blackmere. On the Blighttrap, or more commonly known as the Mycelial Reaper.